Welcome to Hello Port Hueneme. I'm your host Tom Dunn, and today we are doing our City Council review, and with us is Councilman Tom Figg. Welcome, Tom.
Hi, Tom.
The meeting was on April 16th, and we had a lot on the agenda, a lot of reports, and so we want to go over them and let you know what went on there in a condensed form, and that way you can keep up to date on what the City Council and the city is working on. The first thing that we had was a company, I believe it's called California Consulting, and they made a presentation 4 months ago or so that they would look for grants for the city whenever they had something special that they wanted money for, this place would go and look for money. They did do one, if I have it down here, for the playground or just for the park, Miranda Park. Park. They got us about $4,500 to do improvements on that, and they charge us a certain fee a month, and they go out and look for money for the city.
Yeah, this is an outgrowth of the strategic action plan that the council approved about this time last year. And it was in recognition that the city doesn't have the internal capacity, the staff resources to seek out a lot of grant opportunities that kind of go without. That means that we don't vie for these monies that are otherwise available in our circumstance. And so we hired a company that seeks out grants that relate to the needs of our community, and one of them is park development, and this company is, I think this is actually the second grant they've been able to procure that relates to developing both Miranda Park and Bubbling Springs Park. And then they've also been able to secure money for canines is in conjunction with our police department. I think that's a pending grant, but they've been able to get a heads up or an early lead on the competition, so to speak, for these monies. And then there's a program that I believe they are working in conjunction with our economic development consultant, Steve Kenny, on taking advantage of an enterprise zone concept that the state has just initiated here in the last 6 months. And what it does is it tries to provide tax incentives to attract investment dollars to communities that are considered to be distressed. Well, it's not rocket science. Hueneme does have a disadvantaged demographic kind of structure, and so we were successful utilizing the resources of this grant company to become a nominated and approved enterprise community. Now, it won't happen overnight, but it really will dovetail very nicely with our partnership with the Oxnard Harbor District as an avenue to generate more jobs, attract more capital improvements and expansion. So we're really happy the way this is working out.
The police report, and this was a presentation given by Chief Andrew Salinas, and this was a PowerPoint one, right?
Well, Chief is an expert at PowerPoint. I think I can't remember a presentation he didn't make that wasn't a PowerPoint.
Yeah.
We are very pleased with, particularly with Andrew's grasp of the importance and value of social media, how to communicate. And so he's a regular figure at our council meetings and giving these updates.
All the time.
They're plugged in. I'm not nearly as
yeah.
technologically versed on these things, but apparently a big part of the population is, and Andrew is taking full advantage of that tool.
Right. Two other things he mentioned. One is well, there's three things. One is they have increased their beach patrol. They bought a dune buggy that is able to traverse the sands and allows them to go out and hopefully make the beach safer and cleaner and everything for everybody. The second thing was, he mentioned this 6-8 months ago, still the number one problem they have in Port Hueneme is that people leave their cars unlocked.
Yeah.
And that is causing, a good portion of the calls that they receive, or they ask the police to come out and report. And not only is it out on the public streets, it's in gated communities. People feel safe, they leave their car open. There's still people that know how to hop fences, or they stand and wait until a gate opens up and people leave stuff in their car.
Yeah, it's the irony, it's probably the most preventable crime of any of the stats that they monitor. If people just would be more cognizant of keeping their windows and their cars and their vehicles closed or that are not available for entry, lock the doors, don't ever keep your keys in the car. These are just basics, and we're fortunate that it comes down to that is a focus right now versus the challenges that other communities have with more violent issues and armed robberies and the like. That the entry of unlocked vehicles, if that's our biggest problem, I think we're doing pretty good. So I noticed that continues to be kind of his mantra each time he presents an update on the statistics. It's the vehicle entry and to me, that's the most preventable crime. But Port Hueneme, the residents here are very fortunate in that they have, the PD, police department, fire department, and ambulance services that are so readily available that their response time is immediate.
Right.
And that makes the difference between life and death. And so that's just one of those things that sometimes we forget and we take for granted. We're very fortunate here.
Yeah. And I remembered also, there's going to be a new fireworks law.
Oh yes, there's
Do you
going to be.
remember what the details were?
Well, it's an ordinance that allows for greater enforcement of violations. So that if, for instance, somebody as a guest came to somebody's house and happened to have some illegal fireworks, doesn't leave the landlord or the tenant off the hook. If you invited them in and they chose to light off fireworks, you're culpable. It's not just the person that lights the fireworks. And that's been a problem, is in order to enforce our laws that are already on the books about not being legal to light off fireworks in our city, the problem is that those ordinances require that you actually have to catch the violator in the act. Well, that's pretty difficult to be.
Light and run.
Light and run. And so the purpose of this ordinance is to say, no, if we have witnesses that say it came from this property, then you don't need to have the individual himself being caught in the act of lighting a illegal firework. It ends up being the responsibility of the property owner or the tenant that allowed entry to that individual, and so they become culpable. So the hope there is it'll curb. I don't think we'll ever fully eliminate the situation, but this is just another tool that Andrew Salinas has brought forward.
Well, it was a big citizen complaint.
Absolutely.
And the fines are running from $100 to $1,000.
And rightfully so, given the precarious nature of our being a high fire area. Port Hueneme's a little lucky that we don't have a lot of vegetation to concern ourselves with, but it doesn't excuse illegal behavior.
Right. Okay, that's the police report review. The next department is the Public Works, and the department head, Don Villafana, gave a presentation, and it was about items that have been proposed both by your strategic action plan and other input on what needs to be done in the city. And I think the main focus was on the beach and Miranda Park.
Correct.
And let's review a few things of what they're looking to do. I'll start with the first one, which was at the beach. They were talking about replacing a lot of the picnic tables that used to be there, which is, I think, will make a lot of people happy, because there's only 3 or 4 now, and there used to be almost maybe a dozen or
Yes.
10 or something, so they're going to try to replace a bunch of those.
Well, I think the issue came down to, do we replace and renovate what's there, or had been there prior to the last erosion event, and or do we expand the amenities that exist, like first quality volleyball courts for competitive play, or amenities such as food carts or coffee carts. And that was what kind of consumed the dialogue between the council members. Now, 2 of the council members, I think it was John Sharkey and the mayor, Sylvia Snott, had to recuse, or they chose to recuse themselves because of proximity issues. They have ownership or residency within a certain distance of the beach, and they didn't feel comfortable in involving themselves in the discussion.
Can I ask you a question? Because this came up 6 months or so ago when you were, when the city attorney was going over some things that, had to be done by council members on certain issues. I thought the way it was read is that if you do not personally become your standing or whatever, become any better because of something that was being done, i.e. like a traffic improvement, then you could still vote for it. And this to me seems like sort of the same thing. You're improving the park for everybody. Everybody in the city would benefit. The people that live next to it wouldn't give them anything else. I didn't see why they had to recuse themselves on that. Now, if maybe they were going to be able to make some money off of something there, and because they live close, no, you couldn't do it.
Well, that's, I understand your question, and the rules of the Fair Political Practices Commission in Sacramento have determined that there's a certain distance, that there's a presumed benefit, a financial benefit that can occur if you are engaged in a decision that involves the improvement of property within
600 feet, isn't it?
Well, I can't remember. It was 300 to 600.
No.
I don't remember what the exact distance is. There's a presumed benefit that is realized to you, the value of the property you reside at or own. And it's up to individual council members to decide whether there is in fact a potential for economic value benefit from that decision. And those rules are, however they came to be, that's the kind of the game plan or the rule book that we have to live by. And so both Sylvia and John chose to recuse themselves, and so it left Council Member Hensley, myself, and Mayor Pro Tem Berg in debating this question. And what it came down to was this issue of whether we want to fix those things that are there today that need to be upgraded or replaced because of the erosion event from 2 years prior, or do we add additional amenities to these facilities, whether it's Hueneme Beach or Miranda Park. And the discussion ended up with, we didn't come to an agreement or an understanding or a consensus, but we asked our Public Works Director to give us a more robust wish list of things that need to be addressed because of, deferred maintenance over time and things that would make the most sense in terms of value added to those facilities. So this issue was pushed forward. I think it's going to be the second meeting in May when Don Villafana and his group will bring forward a more robust list of projects that would be of a maintenance nature and those that would be of a value-added capital nature, and then we'll have this discussion again.
Yeah.
And I should, the source of this money is about $500,000. It's a one-time shot in the arm. It's money that's residual from a former bond measure from our redevelopment project. So that's why, we have to be prudent how we use this money. This is not reoccurring money, and we want to reduce ongoing maintenance costs, whatever we do. We got to make the most of this money because we're not going to see it again. I mean, again, it gets back to, there's no right or wrong in the decisions. It's a different set of philosophies. Some folks and council members want to enhance the amenities that exist at the beach for the very things that you just mentioned, to draw more people. And there are others, and myself is kind of in that, that realm of I want to take care of what we already have. And in the case of like these windbreaks and the picnic areas, we lost several of those in the last erosion event, and I'd rather that we put those back because they were pre-existing amenities. I don't want to necessarily add new amenities until we get our financial house in order, but that's just my opinion. And that, was a very healthy discussion between the council members, and each of us have a different way of kind of thinking through what's the best use of these monies to benefit the community.
Now let's switch over to Miranda Park. They've already done, I think, 4 of the 6 tennis courts.
Right.
They're starting on the basketball courts.
Oh, and they're done with the basketball.
They finished that? Okay. Yes. They're going to work, or this is part of the proposal where they want to spend the money, is on the, there was restrooms and a restaurant, but a food place there. And the softball fields need to be renovated, better lighting, and I can see the softball fields from where I live, and they look pretty rugged. And my wife took our great-granddaughter, who was 13 months old, over to Miranda Park and out in the outfield, just run around and chase the dogs that are there and run up to watch the kids. And she said there are so many gopher holes out there in the outfield that it's really dangerous. And that was brought up in Citizens Forum to Rod, and hopefully he'll pass that along to the Public Works. Something as simple as that, just filling them up, and hopefully I was told that when my wife used to live in Camarillo, they had the same problem. There's some guy knew how to patch them and make sure that the gophers never came back. So I told them about that. Maybe we'll look into that.
But it isn't as simple as simply putting in some dirt to fill in these holes. Part of it has to do with the use of the ball fields. These were set up to be softball fields, and yet they've been used for other purposes, kind of independent soccer leagues. Mm-hmm. And that tears up the turf.
It does.
And so that's what introduces then the rodents.
Mm-hmm.
It makes it easier for them to access these torn up areas. And so it's not just a matter of, well, we'll re-turf the area. It's also a use issue. And we have to grapple with how best to accommodate users at all of our parks, not just Miranda. But the fields have over time, and this is not a new occurrence, because I used to coach flag football, and it was dangerous out on those fields. But then again, should I have been out there? should our flag football team have been out there, because these again were intended to be softball fields. So there's a management issue that goes into this as well. And we didn't even get into that discussion. But there's lighting issues for the ball fields. You know, they need to be renovated. There's talk about, you know, reactivating some of the lights for the tennis courts. That $500,000 can be easily spent, you know, with a blink of the eye. And the question is, what's the best way in which to spend those
Well,
monies?
they've gone into sort of disrepair over a number of years that the cost is big now.
Yeah.
It's not maintenance, it's
well,
redoing.
That's the old story of pay me now, pay me later. If you defer that maintenance, you're gonna end up in a replacement mode, not a fix mode. And we're close.
Okay, that we have the park and the beach where there's gonna be some decisions made in the next couple meetings.
I expect it'll be back at the second meeting in May, and then hopefully we'll come to some sort of consensus.
Okay, the next item that we had, I think it comes under Public Works also, was the water rate adjustments program that the council has been looking at for a year and a half, something like
It's
that.
been a long haul.
And you have a company that has been given the guidelines that the council would like them to get facts and figures on to see how to best adjust either and/or the resident rates and the commercial rates. Where do we stand on that?
Well, I think there's a general consensus among the council that right now we have a rate structure where the majority of the fee that's charged to all of our customers is on a fixed rate basis. I think it's close to 70% of the cost of providing water to all of our customers. 70% of it is based on a fixed fee based without regard to how much water you actually use. Okay, we are now, I think, in general agreement that will be reversed, so that that the majority of the cost will be based on how much water you actually use, versus 30% would be for fixed rate, which there's always a fixed cost associated with delivering water, regardless of how much you use. You've got, you know, water lines that need to be maintained, and treatment processes that will continue to process even if you don't use the water. But we're reversing the emphasis and putting it more on the volumetric, is what we call the amount of water you use. And what that does is it really encourages more conservation and rewards people for conservation, because the less water you use, the less you pay. Right now, the structure is not quite that. It's just the opposite. It makes little difference of how much water you use. And so I think in the end, what we'll see is a majority of residential users, both multifamily and single family, will see a reduction in their average bill. But it also then has a consequence of affecting our commercial accounts and the high water users like laundromats and maybe some restaurants, and even the Port of Hueneme, which uses a lot of water, or at least their tenants and ships that dock at the harbor use a lot of water. The high water users will end up paying more than what they're paying now, because again, the majority of costs are fixed at 70%, whereas for what we're looking at is just the opposite. So the more water you use, the more you pay. And so some of our commercial accounts will see a hit. And what happened, I think, at the council meeting last week was we directed the consultant that's doing the analysis on how to arrive at a final formula to take a look at a number of issues, again with the goal of reducing the cost to all of our consumers, but in particular trying to reduce some of the pain that may be passed on to our commercial accounts.
Well, I know that again, when I first got involved, next to communication, what residents had to pay for water is a big issue with them.
Big issue.
And I'm glad to see that the council is looking into trying to make it better, for the residents, and it's complicated. There's formulas, there's money for infrastructure, there's bond money or stuff.
Well, and I don't mean to denigrate Oxnard in any way, but Oxnard's struggling with that very issue with the wastewater treatment facility. Is that for years they really weren't adjusting their rates for wastewater treatment to take into account the need for capital replacement of their facility. And now you have a situation where the facility is in dire need of renovation, and in order to catch up, it would require a great increase in the rates charged to the users. And Port Hueneme is second highest now in Ventura County of all other municipal water providers. And a large part of that has to do with this city is grappling with capital replacement needs. We've got a water system, an infrastructure that's aging quickly. And we have a concern with our Public Works Department that if we had a major earthquake event, for instance, we could end up seeing a system that ends up being decimated.
I would like to bring up the last subject, which is an update on the hotel proposal and the office proposal down at Hueneme Beach. I've heard a couple things in the community where people are saying, oh, it's almost ready to go, the proposal is... I don't think that's quite the case. Couldn't you give us an update on where it stands and what the time frame is for the whole thing?
Okay, that wasn't on the agenda, but let me try to, my best understanding of where we are. I believe that the last time there was any real public engagement was back in November or December. There was a community meeting to introduce the idea I don't know if the developer, I can't recall if he was there.
No.
But the idea was simply to let the public know what's on the horizon. We don't have a specific project. We did have a proposal by a developer and his initial ideas was a two-part 12-story tower, one that would be for visitor serving purposes, hotel convention, and the other for Class A office space, largely to complement, I think, tenants of the harbor. But there was no detailed plans. It was just, kind of a concept. That was it. And the city, was introduced with a purchase and sales agreement that was crafted between the city attorney and with the developer, and introduced on the council agenda. I think it was in October. And the council said, we need a little bit more information. We want to make sure that the public is aware that this has been introduced, give them an opportunity to better understand the objectives and the property and all that. And then we would re-entertain the purchase and sales agreement. Now that hasn't returned to the council agenda since it was introduced back in October. I'm not really sure if there is a date certain when it's coming back. I would hope it'll be in the next month to 2 months, but I have not been told when that might occur. So at this point, there's nothing going on. I will use the opportunity that you raised this question of, unfortunately, when time passes, people develop impressions and to conjure up ideas of what's what they think's happening, and it ends up being what I call fake news, and yet a lot of people end up buying into it, and it becomes gospel. Well, that, you know, in this case, just last week I had an encounter with our counterpart at the harbor, the president of the commission at the harbor, and expressed concern to me about an individual that came to their meeting and said, you know, we're going to have a 3 or 4 story parking structure on the Guion easement in front of Anacapa View Homes, and what do you think about that? And blah. Where did that come from? There's been never a discussion about a parking structure on the Guion easement in front of Anacapa View Homes, and there was some suggestions that this project was going to be built out into the ocean on some sort of a, I don't know, an artificial island. I'm not really quite sure I understand what that idea was. So there's a lot of misinformation that's going on, and that's unfortunate. And you know, I'm going to say the city needs to take a little bit of the responsibility for the longer time passes, the more these kinds of situations occur where people conjure up ideas that are simply incorrect.
Well, that's what we're trying to do. What we said in the first part of the show is communication with the people. Let them know what's going on.
And you know what? I don't think we've done a very good job in communicating where we are in this process.
Well,
and I think it allows them, this void of information, allows people to kind of go off into their own, you know, assessment of what they think is happening. And I'm speaking on my behalf. I can't speak for the council at large. It's just my personal viewpoint that we haven't done the job we should have been doing in keeping people better engaged as, well, what happened after your community meeting in December? Where are we today? And I would have liked to have seen a little bit more updates occurring, even though there may be nothing occurring, but it's better than to make that statement than make no statement at all.
I think what I'll do is make a note that every other council meeting, which would be about once a month, we will discuss it at the end of the show. Just here's what's happening. And my goodness, I mean, there's so many things down the road, that hurdles that have to be jumped over, i.e. the Coastal Commission alone could take a year or two. Once the proposal is made, they got to go. So there's, you know, we're at a turtle's pace.
And maybe this is a topic for discussion with your regular meetings with Rod Butler. I don't know how frequently you're doing that. If that's
once a month, yeah.
Is that might be an appropriate topic, and let them know in advance that we'd like to get the word out to people, and make that as part of your agenda.
I think it's a great idea because well, that's one thing we do on Rod's show, and it really worked. And that's when we ask a department to do something that a citizen wanted to know about, we tell them what we know, will it be started, has it been finished, or if we can't be done, we tell them why. And that makes all the difference in the world. So
I certainly agree, and I think that would be a good a way to approach this particular issue, because I'm equally interested.
You'd like to know, huh?
I'd like to know.
Okay. All right, Tom, thank you very much.
Oh, my pleasure, as always.
We said a lot. There's a lot going on at these meetings now, and
oh boy,
we're glad you can watch this. If you have any comments, there'll be a line where you can let us know what's going on, and we look forward to doing the next one. And thank you for viewing.
Until next time.